I've been reading a book on like the power of routine, and it mentioned addiction, and it was saying how once it becomes an addiction and part of your routine, the kind of brain activity goes into your, like, I think it's called the basal ganglia rather than your prefrontal cortex, which is more primitive area.
This is decision making,
Yeah,
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 more
yeah,
it's sort
yeah,
of behavior, yeah.
yeah. And this lady who went from being a massive smoker to a, like, completely just stopped it, was completely sober, didn't drink, didn't smoke. They kind of scanned her brain, and when they kind of tried to lure her into like doing stuff like trying to smoke, or like reminding her of smoking, or like maybe making her smell cigarette smoke or thinking
Yeah.
about it, the area of her brain kind of did light up, like, oh, cigarette smoke, oh, smoking. But then another area of her brain, or I don't know how to, I don't know the wording, but another neural
Overrode
circuit,
that excitement.
yeah, kind of overrode it. And it was because a new habit had been formed, which was not smoking. So the original habit hadn't completely disappeared. It was still firing off in the brain, but it was just overriding it. And I think it was just really cool. And
Neuroplasticity.
yeah,
Neuroplasticity is your brain is so similar to this conversation about affecting our epigenome and affecting our health and our tissue and our immune system. Our brains are very, very plastic. I hate to use that word, but maybe not for microplastics, but the plasticity, meaning that they, I mean, I guess it comes from the same idea, right? Moldable. But the neuroplasticity of our brains is pretty remarkable. And I mean, they've done studies on meditation and how it changes brain waves. And, there's so much cool stuff in science. You're totally on top of these things. I mean, this is the kind of exciting stuff that makes you empowered to take care of yourself, right? That, like, you know what? Life is not over because I'm addicted to this, or I grew up in this family, or I had this childhood trauma, that we can override a lot of what's happened to us, and even what will happen to us by just knowing that our bodies are constantly, changing in good ways too.
yeah, for sure. And mentioning kind of earlier, you were saying how I can't remember the name of the chemical you said, but it dropped as soon as she stopped smoking. How quickly can toxins get flushed out of the body once we stop ingesting them? So, for example, if once I stop eating tuna cans as much, how quickly are the mercury levels going to drop? Does it really depend on the toxic, um, or does
Yeah,
it?
it depends on the individual chemical, because they all have their own half-life of how long they break down. It also depends on where it's stored. For instance, mercury happens to be stored in muscle tissue. Lead happens to be stored in long bones in the bones. And it actually, people are into bone broth here. It was like a big fad. There was a lot of books on it. And what people didn't realize is that when you boil down bones, you should know where those bones come from because they could have a lot of lead released into your bone broth. So you're, trying to diet, lose weight, and be healthy, and yet you're loaded with lead. So these are things that I guess people don't always realize. I certainly didn't. But how long it takes to detoxify your body really depends on a lot of factors, including what the chemical is about, what we know about it, half life, and otherwise, because we might not even know what the half life is if it's not revealed to us. But it also depends on how much you're exercising, sweating, whether or not you're eating fiber, which binds a lot of harmful things, and helps the gut move, to clean out our lymphatic system, whether you have health conditions that work against you, autoimmune or maybe even metabolic issues, whether your kidneys are working properly or your liver's working properly, whether you're drinking enough water. There's so many variables, but the idea is if you're pulling things away and you're sticking with that, your body is getting cleaner every day. Like you're making, and if you fall backwards and you have that allow where you go to birthday cake or travel, so what? You get back on the track when you come back, you know? So it's a process, it's a journey.
Is I guess that's is that the case for your life as well, and your kind of diet and stuff? You allow certain things.
Yeah. I mean, I color my hair. I have to go to a lacrosse game in a couple hours where I'm going to be on toxic tire crumb turf for the next 3 hours. I'm there like 5 times a week. The way I manage it is I don't touch the tire crumb, and I make sure my kids wash with soap and water, which we hope ever happens. And it's kind of like you work within the situation of your life, and you can't be mad at yourself or regret. Especially if you have a kid with, disability, or you have cancer you're managing, or any of the things that we're managing on a day to day basis, life is a journey. This is what I try to follow. I try to do the best I can. If I falter, I just to get back up and try to do my good stuff again. And I think that's the only thing we can do in this situation. It's not defeatist, it's empowering to be not the victim, but the person in control of those choices.
Definitely. And I guess it's also making sure you don't fall back into that trap and say you have that birthday cake, maybe you have it once, you don't have it 2 days in a row, because if it happens 2 or 3 days in a row, it's kind of another new formation of another habit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the judgment. It's I'm trying to give people and myself included, the wiggle room to have a quality of life that is happy and fun and joyous and not filled with shame, regret, and resistance. You really want to have a positive reinforcement for this process, because it's not easy. Being healthy is work. I mean, who would ever have said that? But to be healthy in modern day times, we have to work at it. It doesn't come easily, and so you have to choose what you're willing to work at and do it at your own pace, you know?